Welcome to another episode of All About Art. In this episode, I sat down with Courtney Johnson, career strategist, social media expert, and the author of the newly released Career Cheat Codes. Courtney is someone who built an audience of millions by saying the hard truths about career advice out loud, that working hard in silence is not necessarily a strategy, that visibility is a skill, and that knowing how to make the right people aware of what you do is actually just as important as doing it well. Her problematic career cheat code series went viral on TikTok before becoming a book, which is itself, I think, a masterclass in the very principles that she writes about. So in this episode, we talk about what a personal brand actually is and what it means to build it for people who may never actually describe themselves as quote unquote content creators. And we talk about how the art world might be one of the industries that actually really needs this conversation the most. We get into the unspoken truths of competitive gatekept industries, like the art world. We talk about how to convert visibility into real opportunity, and we talk about what it looks like to build a career with intention rather than, for example, just accumulating experience and hoping that someone notices. We also compare notes as two authors who have recently released books on career building in very different worlds, which made for a conversation I found incredibly useful, I think not only for you listeners, but also for my own thinking and my own growth. I think that this episode will resonate whether you work in the arts or not, but if you're listening to All About Art, you'll probably be working in the arts. And if you do work in the arts, I do think that it might reframe some things that you've been told in terms of what it means to go down predetermined paths or what it means to create your own from scratch. Thank you to Courtney for coming on the podcast. Hi, Courtney. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So we're both coming out with books, which is what we see behind us, and they're both out at roughly the same time. Can you tell us a bit more about Career Cheat Codes? How did it come about, and what do you want someone to walk away with when they read it?
Career cheat codes came about because when I started working in the corporate world, I noticed that I was different than everybody else. All of these people around me seemed to have this secret language or secret way of communicating. They did things that I didn't really understand. And I realized very quickly it's because they came from families with corporate backgrounds or entrepreneur parents. And there's this whole unwritten rule book that I didn't know and I had to learn on my own. So immediately in my career, I start being really creepy and documenting all of these little tips and tricks that I was learning from others, all of these little hidden rules that people did. And a couple of years later, I turned that into a TikTok series that then got picked up into this book. So what I hope people take away is that the traditional or easily Googleable or straightforward career advice is not necessarily as straightforward as you might think. There is a lot of uncomfortable rules, uncomfortable cheat codes, and uncomfortable hacks that you can use to get ahead in your career. It might be a little problematic, but it's shit that works.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's why it also really took off online, right? Because when you see these things, it's someone actually speaking about the truth and pulling back the curtain behind these things that people don't really want to talk about. Mm-hmm. And I think what is a little bit interesting for me to consider is because you're from the United States and I'm half American, half Austrian, but I've lived here in the UK for 10 years. And we have this, I've never seen a class divide as prominent or as easily recognizable as here in the UK. Mm-hmm. And I think what you're talking about and what you're referencing is also a little bit of a class distinction. You see that people grow up thinking or learning certain things and these certain rules. And you're sitting here saying, well, no, look, this doesn't need to be like this anymore. It doesn't need to be for the privileged few who get access to this information because of their families or because of how they grew up or because of what they were exposed to early on in life.
Mm-hmm. I love that you bring that up because it is so true. The culture here in the UK is so much more distinct in that you kind of stay in your lane.
Yeah.
It's almost uncool, right? My brother lived here for a while and he was telling me that it's, as someone who has his degree, it was uncool for him to hang out with people who didn't have a degree, right? That wouldn't really happen in the States. You can hang out with whoever you want to, but you really want to be with people on your same level. And I love that in the States, we have this idea that you can move up, you can change classes, you can put in the effort or learn the cheat codes and have this upward mobility. That doesn't necessarily exist in the UK. And that's why we made a UK version of this book and brought in people who live here and understand the culture
Did you
here.
change parts of
Yeah.
the
Oh, yeah. We
book?
changed a lot. Yeah.
Oh my
Definitely.
God, I didn't know that. I thought
Mhm.
that it was just because, sometimes when you publish a book, it comes out like my book is coming out in the US and it's going to be the same cover, the same content. Also, because I did quite an international, like I threw an international net when it came to my interviewees. But that's really interesting that you really changed it for the UK audience.
Well, I think what's most important for the UK folks to understand is that you can evolve, you can change. Yes, it might be seen as not accepted by some of your peers, but we do a lot of mindset work in the book that can help you overcome that and help you see that your mission, your dreams, your goals is bigger than what family or friends might say about you in the group chat.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, that is sort of what your whole entire, I guess, personal brand centers on. It's about working loudly. It's about making sure that the right people hear your name. And I think that that advice comes really naturally in some industries. However, me coming from the art world, it's really interesting to be speaking to you because in the arts, and maybe this is a UK thing and an art world thing, and it becomes this like perfect storm. But there's this really deeply ingrained culture of discretion and also of not being seen to self-promote. And yet there is this whole entire premium on who you know. And I really discovered that because I went to New York to interview people for my book last year. And I was there for a whole month. And basically, I went and I put my energy out there. I was telling people what I was doing, and I got so much back. People were responding, encouraging, connecting me to people, helping me climb a ladder in New York. And I was like, man, I have worked nearly a decade in the UK for this, and no one encourages me like Americans do when they see the hustle. That's something I really love about American culture. But what would you say to someone who's operating in that sort of environment, taking the tools from your book, someone who is maybe working in the UK and also working in the art world where they feel this pressure and maybe this cringe, which I know you talk about a lot.
Yeah. Well, I work with people in all sorts of industries that are more traditional or conservative, maybe finance, art, law, medicine, right? It's a different culture where it can be seen as, you know, low brow to be posting, to be putting yourselves out there. And it definitely presents another layer of challenge. I think that's really cool what you did in New York because you're providing a win-win situation. What was interesting about what you did with the book is you're, first of all, basically stroking these people's ego, saying, I think your perspective is really interesting. I want to feature you. And you're creating a win-win because they get to be featured in a book and you have more material and content and diverse perspectives for their book. So when it comes to folks in the art world that may feel that cringe, I would ask them to consider what's a win-win situation that you can create to boost other people's too. Because I understand that it can feel really cringy to make it all about yourself. You don't have to start by making it all about yourself. Can you start by talking about other artists? Can you start by sharing information that you think might help others? Can you start by focusing out? That's going to take the pressure and the spotlight off of you. You're going to build those skills of learning how to build a personal brand. And then once you get enough traction, it's easier to flip it back on yourself. But I do find that so interesting that self-promotion is an extremely important part of the art world. And at the same time, it can be seen as not a good thing.
Yeah, it's so difficult here. I think people see it and they just roll their eyes, but really I think they look at these people who then end up garnering a large following and these opportunities. Institutions and galleries and things do look at people who are, I guess, quote unquote, thought leaders in the space. And I think that I actually have a whole chapter on content creation in the arts in my book because I look at different people who are doing it differently. I talk to a podcaster, I talk to someone who has a large following on Instagram, and then I talk to someone who works behind the scenes in social media for different organizations and companies. And one of the threads that I saw throughout all of those interviews was if you are not authentic and if you don't admit when you don't know something, if you somehow present in a way, I mean, there's a little bit of fake it till you make it in every single thing that you do, right? You need to exude a level of confidence, but at the same time, you also need to have that kind of educational backing if you're going to be talking about art history, or you need to be able to just know about the topics that you're going to be touching on. And then that's okay. People will respect your voice. But I do still think people look at other people creating content in the art world and they're just like, oh my God. But it's the same thing if people talk more about, like, if academics talk about art and art history versus what it means to talk about art on the art market. There's always this divide of like, oh, how dare we make it accessible and understandable? Yeah, I mean, it sucks that we live in a capitalist society sometimes, but like that is the society we live in, and we have to learn how to adapt to that, even in the cultural and creative industries, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we can circumvent some of these institutions in order to get to your goal.
Yeah.
And yes, that can be scary, but something I talk about in my book is how I was rejected from a lot of big institutions in my field, which is a lot of tech. And now they're inviting me to speak. They're hiring me as a consultant right now that I have an established personal brand. And I'm curious if you've seen that in the art world too, of people who maybe it was looked down upon of them sharing at first, but now they get to circumvent a lot of the traditional channels because they've established a presence or given so much value.
So I think it's quite interesting, but like in the arts, as because I personally come from a working class background, and when we talk about this class distinction and whatnot, I do think it's quite difficult, especially in a city as expensive as London. And when you're working in the creative industries, the pay is statistically just a lot lower than if you're working in any other industry, and other than maybe education, I think, and a couple of other like creative things. But in comparison to tech and law and those sorts of industries, it can be a really difficult ride. And so thinking about these ways to add value, but really thinking outside the box and breaking down those traditional paths of like, oh, but you should go to university and then you should do this and this and this, and that is the correct path. And that's not how you can think sometimes when you're trying to break into an industry that's maybe not traditionally made for you.
Yeah, a cheat code I have in the book is to think about what your friends ask you for advice on. That is a really great place to start when it comes to maybe a side hustle or an offering or something that you want to start. Because you're right, if you just go the traditional full-time route, you're not going to make enough money to live here. There's got to be other places where income is coming in. And oftentimes, what is obvious to you is completely mind-blowing to somebody else. So how I think of it is, how can you teach others? How can you help others? And what do your friends ask you for advice about? That is a really, really good place to start.
Yeah. And so I want to talk about how the Problematic Career Cheat Code series went viral on TikTok before it became a book. And I think this is a really interesting sort of own case study on what personal branding can do. So can you walk me through how that actually happened? What were you posting? What do you feel like landed when you were posting? And what did it teach you about building your own personal brand as you were posting this series? Like, what did you learn from that?
Yeah, I had the idea in my head for a couple of years. I thought maybe I would publish it as a blog or a LinkedIn post, but I was too scared. It was too unprofessional because I was telling people things like change your name on your resume to be less feminine if you're applying for a masculine industry. I was telling people how to get your boss off your ass by essentially psychologically manipulating them. Like all of this insane stuff. I'm like, I can't post this on LinkedIn. So when TikTok came around, I was like, okay, nobody knows me on TikTok. This is the perfect medium for it. So I just started making videos. And what I learned was the importance of creating every single day. I committed to posting every single day on TikTok for an entire year, and that year completely changed my life. I think it was post 280 something that got picked up into a book. So biggest takeaway from that series is what you think is obvious is mind-blowing to other people. Commit to creating every single day in whatever medium that is to you, even again, if your brain is telling you it's obvious, and other people are going to get value from it.
Yeah.
And your voice will naturally emerge from that repetition, which is exactly what an artist does.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like when we're thinking about how our expertise end up being really surprising or helpful or mind-blowing for others, we forget that. We forget how when you work for a few years and you actually really delve into a topic and you become an expert in something, how when you're sharing that, something that is second nature to you or very obvious to you is completely new for someone else.
Mhm.
And so even when you're telling people to understand the ecosystem better that they're going to be
Mhm.
functioning in, that already is a big piece of advice.
Totally. Yeah. People need to understand that it's not as straightforward as putting in an application and you get the job, right? There is an entire ecosystem of connections and networking and showing up and being familiar that completely will boost your career. I think something else I really want people to understand is that your work doesn't speak for itself. And this is a
Yeah.
big cheat code in the book
Yeah.
that you might think, especially like same, I come from a working class family, and um, the sentiment is put your head down, work hard, and everything will work out for you.
Yeah.
And that is not true. You could have the best work in the entire world. You could be the smartest in the entire world, and the opportunity still might go to somebody else. They might go to the person who is at the galleries, who is the most visible, who is showing up, who people recognize or people trust. Even if they're less qualified than you, they might be getting those opportunities because you're not showing up. So it's really important to understand that your work does not speak for itself. You need to speak for it and show up for it. There can be a fear of, I don't want to make this all about me, me, me.
Yeah.
I want to be humble. But the truth is, when you show up and you show your expertise and you gain familiarity, you're actually helping others. For example, let's say you're really looking for a new hairdresser and you would love to get a new hairdresser. It's really helpful that you go to a party and somebody says, "Hi, I'm a hairdresser."
Yeah.
You're like, "Oh my gosh, I've been looking for you," right?
Yeah.
Maybe you're looking for, I don't know, a dress to wear to your friend's wedding and you saw the dress and now they're showing up in your Instagram feed. That's helpful. Yay, amazing. Like, I was looking for you. And it's the same with your career. Like, you are helping others when you show up and make yourself familiar, because when they're looking for that perfect person to fill the role or the gig or the opportunity, you're top of mind. So
Yeah.
they are not going through all these channels to research and research and research. They know, all right, I know exactly who this person is and they're going to be a perfect fit. So you're making their job easier. And another way to think about it is marketing, advertising, and personal brand is a part of business, and your career is a business. You would never be driving down the road and see a sign for Coca-Cola and say, "Oh my God, Coca-Cola is bragging. I can't believe they have a billboard. Like, they're so bragging and selfish." No, you would say, "Oh, that's called marketing and advertising, and it's a part of business, and it makes a business successful." Like,
Yeah.
very
I'd
objectively.
probably also just be like, "Oh, a nice Diet Coke right now
Yeah,
would
it
be
sounds
so
great.
good."
So crispy.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that you yourself are a company. Your career is essentially a company, and marketing and advertising is part of it in the same
Yeah.
way like taxes is part of it. Sure, maybe you don't like it. It's part of it. Like, sorry.
Yeah, no, taxes. Ugh.
Yeah, no, not fun.
I think like this idea of a personal brand, it is essentially a performance. You have to perform something and you have to be strategic about that performance. And I think that sometimes curating this image can potentially have little to do with the actual work. Now, not
Mhm.
always. I think when it really has to do with the work, people show up authentically. And I think that's where you have a sustainable platform and personal brand because it's really built on the work people are doing. But sometimes, and we see this with a couple of, professionals who have maybe risen and fallen quite quickly or things like that. What do you think about that line between this idea of genuine visibility and sometimes just noise?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to authenticity, and also personal brand takes a long time to develop. It takes many mediums and channels to develop. Maybe you're writing, maybe you're posting, maybe you're showing up in person, maybe you're going to events, maybe you're networking. It's a lot. It's a commitment, and it's a new um layer to your career. Now, if it's just noise, these are quick, cheap shots. And in anything, there is no get rich quick scheme, right? When I think of these cheap shots in personal branding, it's a scam. It's a get rich quick scheme. It doesn't
Yeah.
work. So, sure, yes, you can be inauthentic, but it's going to negatively impact you. People are going to find out. People are not going to resonate with you if you're being a faker, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So authenticity is so, so important because authenticity builds and builds and builds and gives you this beautiful longevity in your career. And inauthenticity is going to hurt your career, even though it might give you a temporary spike.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think thinking about the long game with that is really important. And also keeping in mind if you see people who are doing the work that you might aspire to be doing, looking at like why you're interested in them and seeing their authentic selves online, I think is a really valuable way to view it. And it's a really valuable way to be inspired by someone else's vulnerability of putting themselves out there, right?
Totally.
So social media has arguably done a lot more to democratize the art world than, for example, institutions. Even though institutions like museums really try, there is just this barrier to entry. And I think you and I also both coming from working class backgrounds, we can understand that there is this sort of mental threshold when it comes to entering cultural spaces like that. And I think that not having these traditional gatekeepers and being open to the more public and public voices has been really valuable for the arts. Do you think that platforms have fundamentally changed who actually gets a voice in this? Because when we're thinking about audience building, right? It is fraught with its own stuff. Like there's a level of privilege of people who can have the time to create content. I mean, you can also make time. I've been doing it for as long as I can remember now, but there's also a level of, let's say, pretty privilege. There's so many different layers to it, right? And so I'd like to talk about that, what it means to democratize versus what the issues of that could also potentially bring up.
Yeah, there's a lot of different privileges in content creation. Of course, there's biases that might impact your work. However, those are pretty nominal because 99% of people aren't going to last past a couple of weeks of building a personal brand. Like on LinkedIn is a great example where you just have to post once a week for a year to be in the top 2% of the billion people on the platform.
I'm in the top 1%, and I'm like, how am I doing that? Because I think only 30,000 people have over 30,000 followers.
Yeah.
And I have like 27,000 followers, and I'm like, how did that happen? What did I do? And I just kept posting. And it's like,
or with podcasts, in order to be in the top 80% of all podcasts that have ever been created, you post 6 episodes. So again, yes, there's all of these privileges that can add nominal effect in the same way posting at a certain time of day or having a certain format can have that incremental effect. Yes, that is true. But that's not the bulk. The bulk of it is just doing it and showing up because most people don't. So that's actually where the competition is. It's in the longevity. And can you continue to show up even when it's uncomfortable?
Yeah. When people ask me tips on having a podcast, I always say, if you want to do video, okay. If you want to do audio, okay. If you want to do it once a week, okay. If you want to do it once a month, okay. Just make sure you're doing something that you can stick with.
Yes.
Because if you're going to be doing it once a week and you're going to burn out in 3 months, that's not going to actually bring you anything. But if you do it once a month for 5 years, you'll get a book deal. You know what I mean? Like if you just stick with it and you find something that really is sustainable for you, then that is actually where you can build. And I mean, for me, I didn't have this like overnight success of 10K followers. I mean, my following on Instagram is not that big, but like even on LinkedIn and whatever, it was just a matter of constantly showing up. And that is really where it's at. Even though in the beginning, I didn't know what I was posting. I didn't know what my brand was. I didn't know what my direction was. Even with the podcast, I didn't fully understand it. But it was just about showing up. And then that sort of resulted in something anyway, which I think is something that you've spoken recently about on your podcast as well, is like, if you don't know what your niche is, that's fine. Just start posting and you'll figure it out.
Yeah. I think it's actually really silly to start with a niche.
Yeah.
We're so multi-passionate and multifaceted as humans. Start by creating what you're interested in, and your niche will naturally come about based on your audience's feedback. So when I started posting, I was posting about books, travel, career, personal brand, like so many different things, cooking, my dogs. And turns out career and personal brand, out of the 40 topics I started with, were the ones that people resonated with the most.
Yeah.
If I would have chosen a niche, I would have been talking about completely different subjects. I would have never gotten any of these opportunities because I thought career and personal brand were obvious.
What did you think you would maybe be talking about if you would have had to
Yeah.
choose like back then?
I have a Airbnb and I thought that I was gonna be like an Airbnb hosting influencer, which is so silly.
I love that. That's
Yeah.
so different
It's
to
so
what you
different. And
do
if
now.
I would have said, I'm gonna choose a niche, it would have been that. Which is it's not even something I enjoy creating content about. It's just what I thought in my head
Oh,
was the
yeah.
right niche.
Yeah. Do you think that the underlying mechanics of that sort of thing, thinking about attention to opportunity, do you think that they are the same regardless of what you're trying to achieve,
Mm.
these mechanics?
I do think it's the same. I mean, let's think about the process. You're applying to work at an institution, or maybe you are applying or pitching yourself to be in a gallery.
Yeah.
You're going to apply. They're going to consider you. They're going to research you. They're going to make a first impression based on your portfolio or your website or your social media or whatever by glancing at it for 3 seconds. Their brain is going to start giving them a ton of unconscious bias, which can be positive or negative unconscious bias. And they're going to make a decision in a couple of seconds whether they want to move forward or not move forward based on that. Like it really is a couple of seconds. So I would recommend everybody look at, what are they searching of you? Look at your Google search, look at your social media, look at your portfolio, website, whatever it might be. And what is the unconscious assumptions that starts to come up? So go ask 10 friends. Oh, I see that your style is very unique and you look young and you look very bubbly and creative and you look fresh. Okay, do you want to be seen as that or do you want to be seen as more mature and experienced, right? Whatever you're desiring, you want to make sure that that 3 second test, that 3 seconds that people are looking at your stuff is putting you in the same direction of the brand that you want to create.
Yeah.
And I think we think that we often can get in the trap of, oh, they're going to really evaluate everything I'm doing and they're going to read deeply into my essays and they're going to read deeply into my back. They're not. They're going to glance at you.
I think that's the important thing that people don't seem to understand. Or it's not that people don't seem to understand it, it's that we don't want to admit it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. We want to think we're all being thoughtful
Yeah.
and patient, and we're not.
No. And I think like we are constantly getting this like a like waterfall of information constantly flowing on us, especially in today's day and age with like constant news cycles and social media and imagery just hitting us every single second of every single day. And then when it comes to actually making these decisions of hiring someone or thinking about, okay, who can I activate to be a panelist on this panel? Who does this work? I'm not going to go and Google, and especially not in the arts. I'm sorry, but like Googling something in the arts is like trying to find a needle in a haystack.
Yeah.
When you Google, for example, I went to Italy again for the book last year, and I was like, best contemporary art galleries in Rome. None of the galleries that I know are really good because I've been to art fairs and I've seen and spoken to people, none of them showed up on Google.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, why is this not showing up?
Mm-hmm.
This is crazy. And so, and if you Google like, oh, best speaker in art, it's just going to be like the 3 most famous people, and that's it. And it's not going to be someone like me. It's not going to be someone who's like mid-career, who would be perfect for the role or perfect for the speaking gig. And so you need to do exactly what you were talking about earlier, putting yourself out there and being the person that people think about and is at the forefront of someone's mind. Because people won't sit and sift through all the hay to find the needle.
Mm-hmm.
But also, why should they have to? It's also really difficult. Like our world the systems aren't built to benefit people who don't talk about themselves, at least not right now.
It also comes down to privilege. Like if you have massive privilege and massive connections and you come from a family who's already well connected in the art world, you probably don't need this as much. Like that's true.
Yeah,
if you're someone who is self-made, who is doing this on their own, this is mandatory.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you don't have to drop everything and become an influencer and like create a YouTube and a podcast and post every day or whatever. Again, posting 1 time a week on one platform is going to give you enough of a portfolio of your thoughts and reflections and who you are, that's going to be enough to put you ahead of somebody else because, 98% of people aren't actually going to do it. So it also doesn't have to be overwhelming. It can be something very simple. Like you said, you could maybe do a podcast once a month and it could be 20 minutes.
Yep.
You could have a Substack where you share somebody else's story every 3 weeks. Like, it does not have to be a huge time commitment. It's just, what are you able to commit to
Yeah.
in order to show up and be yourself? But the cheat code here, the problematic cheat code here is like, the less privilege you come from, the more important it is for you and the more vital that's going to be in order to break into the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the art world, and I might get a lot of flack for saying this, but like there are so many, I guess there is this kind of Nepo baby thing that people talk about a lot. I don't know what it's like in other industries because I've only ever really worked in the art world since I've taken my career more seriously. I mean, I worked at like in like retail and at Subway, when I was a teenager, but like since after graduating or like during my university degrees and things like that, I've been working in the art world. And so it's all I'm really familiar with. And sometimes I end up talking to people and I forget how many people actually come from a different background to me. And what you talked about at the very beginning of our conversation, thinking about these decisions or these little like micro cheat codes, which I guess you go into more depth on in your book. But these things that you were noting down when you were entering your industry, this is what happens so much when someone comes from a very wealthy collecting family, and then the kid in the family gets an internship at a big auction house or gallery, and then they end up having a really thriving career. But like, because when they need to reach their sale quota as a salesperson, they can go to the people they know because they collect art. So it's like, yes, they still have to graft. They still have to think about what could I offer these people, but they have so much more access to that versus someone who comes from a very different background. And you do need to really build your own path. You need to build your own path instead of being able to walk down a path that's sort of already paved for you a little bit.
Totally.
You really have to build it. And that's hard.
It's hard. And it's, I was talking to a friend the other day who's an artist, and she was saying, oh, but there's all of these like Nepo babies. They're so cool. Their Instagrams are so mysterious. We don't even know their last name. Like, they're just like, I want to emulate that. I'm like, you can't emulate that. It won't work for you if you emulate that. I know that's a really uncomfortable thing to hear, but you do not come from that background. You cannot go in the front door. Like, you got to go in the side door or a back door or a window or find some other way, because this traditional route that this person took, it was, 20 years of growing up in this certain family and going to this certain boarding school and being in this certain cachet of society, and that is not you. So it's also, we want to think like, I admire this person, so I'm going to follow their advice and follow what they did, but it's not going to work if you come from a different background.
No, and you don't know what sort of building blocks they had in place already. Right. And that's another thing too, is that like, even all the way down to the little decisions of the everyday, like, okay, did they have to think about pre-cooking their lunches because they can't afford to eat out at that time in their life? Or do they have a mortgage to pay versus rent, or are they living at home and they don't have to pay any rent? So if they have an income or not doesn't make a difference to them. They can put all of their time into this, into building their brand, into their hustle. Or are they more like me, and I was working full time and building my brand on the side until I got to the point where I could say goodbye to the full-time job and focus on writing the book and building this even further. Everyone who, if I look at someone and they're way further ahead with their personal brand, I'm like, comparison doesn't do me any good here, because their circumstances could be completely different. Or they could be coming from a similar background to me, and that's fine. And maybe they made it further in some other way. That means it's inspiring. But, I think you never know what's going on behind the scenes of someone else's sort of career.
Yeah, I have a crazy career story to tell. So I literally came from, working class family. I was super in debt. I luckily went to university, got super in debt, had to work my way out, got in debt again. Anyways, been there, done that. Now I have a successful business. Very blessed for that. It's taken about 10 years and I'm in a different place. And my partner also came from a small island, like worked his way up, now has a successful business himself. And we were on vacation last week with a friend who is a startup founder. And my partner says to this friend, like, hey, could you do me like a favor? They were doing each other a favor. I don't even know what they're talking about. But he's like, yeah, I'll return your favor if you do this. When my son, who is in the womb, he's not even born yet, when my son gets to be like 14, can you give him an internship? And they made this handshake like over oysters that my unborn baby son would get this internship when he's 14. And my mind was blown. I'm like, if this is happening here now, like what is happening in these ultra wealthy families? Like we literally just got my son a internship and he is not even born yet.
That I respect that. You know what? I want to build that for my
No,
baby.
exactly. But what I'm saying is like,
I hope my kid wants to go into art because they'd be the best Nepo baby.
I'm like, we've built successful businesses, but we're not like rolling in the dough, right? We're just like, we've built a creator business. He's built
like
stable, stable
good.
business. And this other friend built a tech startup, and it's just crazy that it made me realize like I never heard of anybody doing that before. I've never seen this before, and I can just imagine if it's happening here, how is it happening in other parts of the world?
Totally. Totally. Oh my God, that is so funny. Wow. I'm gonna if I end up having kids later down the line, that is exactly the approach that I'm gonna be taking. Courtney, I am going to draw this episode to a close because I am aware of time. But when I close my episodes, I usually ask my guests if you could have dinner with one person from art history, who would it be and why? But because it's quite special not to have someone or to have someone who's not in the art world per se, I want to open it up a little bit. So if you could have dinner with any creative figure from history, whether it's an artist, it's a musician, a writer, a filmmaker, what have you, whoever comes to mind, who would it be and why?
Yeah, there's an entrepreneur who I just really admire. His name's Naval Ravikant, and he brings a lot of art thinking into his entrepreneurship and creative thinking into his entrepreneurship, and has a really great book about how entrepreneurship is a type of art and how we can learn from artists. And I think he would be a great person to have dinner with to really understand that perspective, because in business, there's obviously a science side, there's a math side, but the art side is mysterious and intriguing and unique and so personal, and his take and perspective on that is just really fascinating.
Yeah, I was having a discussion with someone the other day, and we were basically going into depth about how a lot of like most entrepreneurs, or I think all entrepreneurs, are creatives because you have to really think outside the box, and a lot of artists are the same. And so I think that's a really, really good point. I would love to talk to him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, Courtney, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.